vises are something that I use, but I don't have a whole bunch of really in-depth information about the complexities and varieties and function of all the different kinds of vises there are. So I don't want you to think for a second that just because I'm going to talk to you about vises that I know much about them. But I do know that they're irreplaceable. I know you've got to have one in a workshop. In fact, they say a blacksmith can never have too many vises, but I'm not sure they're talking about these tools. This is an iconic representation of a vise that was made in the USA for a long time. Wilton was understood to be the sort of the pinnacle of vise quality. This particular one is referred to as the Wilton Bullet, I think, probably bullet shaped on the back. This is made with a combination of casting and forging and machining. Machined, forged, cast, machined, forged, cast. If there's something that's frozen, rusted in place, that you have to be able to twist, no one is strong enough to hold both sides of the wrench and really get the leverage you need to break something loose. But if you can clamp one side in the vise and it's bolted to your workbench, you can break it loose. So the sort of obvious function of a vise is it's an extra man in the shop. It's an extra set of hands. It will hold something while you're doing something to it. It can also act as a press. It can push things together that you just cannot squeeze hard enough or even hit hard enough to make them move. It is something that you can hold when you've got to get it hot, which is a nice feature. I mean, you're holding it in pliers and you're getting it hot, and then you've got to set down your torch, and so being able to withstand heat. This Wilton Bullet has pipe vise jaws inside of the throat of those jaws. There's an example of a pipe vise. I assume that's fairly self-explanatory. Old-time plumbers just had to have them. New-time plumbers can work for months at a time and never need a pipe vise, I think, says the carpenter. But in any case, if you don't have a vise on your workbench, you don't really have a workbench. As long as I'm talking about Wilton vises, I got to turn you on to a couple other YouTube videos, channels about Wilton vises. A couple guys did just some remarkable things. And the first is Keith Rucker. And he restored one of these things better than new. I lack the patience for restoration that fellow demonstrated on making one of these old girls absolutely pristine, perfect. The other video series that I think you're really going to like is by Oxtoolco. He made a Wilton Bullet from scratch. Now, what an accomplishment. And it is not diminished by the fact that I tell you it was a baby bullet. The jaws were 2 inches wide. But he still made a perfectly rendered example of a Wilton Bullet vise from scratch, himself, his own creativity, his own ambition, his own tooling. So check those guys out. You're going to have a deeper appreciation for Wiltons. But in the meantime, I've got some other vises in here that perhaps you'd be interested in seeing. So this is a vise that is called variously a blacksmith's vise, or a leg vise, or a post vise. The leg vise, post vise designation refers to this. So that goes down and fits into a socket that in this case is embedded in a steel plate that's cast in a little bit of concrete. This type of a vise is specifically designed for blacksmithing. First of all, there are, I want to say, no cast components. Now the box in there may have some cast pieces, but the rest of this is either forged or machined, I think. Kind of taking a chance there. But the point is, this is tough. You almost never see one of these ears broken off because that's a very husky forged section. And the rest of it is that the force of pounding on this transfers straight down to the ground. So it's not like you're just bashing on the case or on the slide or on some component that was never designed to take it. You're beating on something that is really hard to break. The other thing that sort of earmarks this specifically for blacksmithing is the pitch on the screw. These, I believe, are Acme threads. Now, yeah, I'm going to stick with that. Correct me if I'm wrong, but that's a very coarse thread. It's square in section, it's strong, and it covers a lot of territory. Now, why would that be that it would need to be faster than a machinist vise? Because you're almost always clamping steel at temperature. It's got to be grabbed while it's hot. If you've got a monkey tool and you're upset, you're truing up a shoulder on a tenon, or if you're riveting, or if you've got a bending operation going, or whatever it is, you need that to get tight fast. You don't have time to be tightening up a machinist vise. So speed and strength are what these are built for. The downside is these jaws open and pivot. The center of the pivot is on this one about 24 inches down. So those jaws are always perpendicular to a line. Let me say this right. These jaws essentially are always parallel to a radius line, a line drawn through the center of a 24-inch diameter circle. So as they open up, they are no longer parallel to each other. So on a big piece, you don't get that perfectly parallel face between the jaws that you get on a machinist vise, but a blacksmith doesn't care about that. The same nut cases that are always on the lookout for anvils are always on the lookout for post vices. And if you see a post vise leaning up in a shop somewhere or an old barn, come to a full and complete stop and use your eyes, because there could well be an anvil lurking in one of the shadows in that same building. They often kind of come as a set, you see. I mean, anvils and post vices. Where you see one, you're liable to see the other. I have here on the vise, on the ground, another machinist vise that was given to me by my friend Ken Jordan. And the vise itself is not that remarkable, but you see that metal base? That's very remarkable. Look what it allows me to do. So this is a Fowler bench vise, machinist vise. The slide is all cast and there's a little anvil and it rotates nicely, and that's all good. You know, that's great. But look at this. You can change the orientation of those jaws depending on which one of those flanges you put in your big vise. That's pretty handy. Unlike anvils, which are sort of designated in pounds, vises are often designated in how wide the jaw is. So that's 4 3/4. That would probably be referred to as a 5-inch vise. My bigger post vises are 7s. Let me show you how the attachment works on these post vise for attaching to your bench or your post or your base. See that? So that yoke also captures the spring, which holds the jaws open. So you just tap that in there. Put this keeper in. It's got the notches that make it help it stay. That starts from the wide side. Is that a satisfying sound or what? This vise is special to me in one particular way, and that is it belonged to Sam Ball, my wife's granddad, who gave me the guts of the sawmill that I built when I was 20 and 21, and who taught me a lot about what it takes to start doing something even though you don't know how to do it. So this was in his shop. This is a Monarch. It says Monarch right there, and there's the bust of a lion. It's been beat up. Sam used his tools hard, but the jaws are true and the swivel works and the slide and the screw is smooth. And I don't use it very often, but I would sure hate to lose this. It's really the last tool that I have that was important to Sam, and Sam was important to me. So keep your eye open for a vise. I mean, a vise can be as simple as a pair of vise grips clamped to a piece of plywood, or as complex as an expensive machinist vise carefully attached to an expensive and machined machinist table, or an expensive, really high-quality wooden workbench can have vises. But you got to have some sort of a vise, because a man can't always hold with one hand hard enough to do the work that he needs to do with his other hand. Probably almost every flat surface in here, well, a lot of them anyway, either have had or will have a vise attached to them. They're that critical to getting the work done that a man sometimes needs to do. If you've got a great idea for some great content, we want to hear it. But we're going to lose it if you just send it to us in the comments. So go to our website. There's a spot there under Contact Us. There's a form. You can put your ideas in there. We'll darn sure read it, and we'll be able to go back and find it when we need it.